Yo,
Hey,
what's good, man?
not much. I'm just chilling, getting the day going. How are you?
Dude, doing good, man. Doing good. I love the smiley in the background, bro. The absolute classic DK vibe.
Yeah, dude. Had to
Fuck
do
yeah.
it. Had to do it.
Cool, dude.
I'm incredibly disappointed that you're not a old little Japanese
That I'm not
woman.
a mom, that I'm not Satoshi's mom. Well, I
I
am
was
Satoshi's
re
mom. I have the blue check to confirm it. So
Oh, that's
that's
true.
basically the proof.
That's all you need.
So, yeah, exactly.
No questions. I
Uh,
believe it. I believe it.
Oh man, I'm happy to have you on, man. I'm stoked to chat and dive in more and talk about your work, talk about you. I am recording now. If you want, we can just dive right in if that's cool with you. Um, so
Let's
hell yeah.
let's dive on in, sir. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fuck yeah, dude. So I guess we just start with, kind of at the top, like who is Daniel Koeth and when did you get started with photography? When did you get started in the art realm? Like, what is the story and how did you get to, where you are today, selling pieces super successfully, crushing it in this market? Absolutely like inspiring, man. I love to see it. So how did it all get started, man?
Well, that's incredibly kind of you. So thank you for the nice words. I appreciate that so much.
Of course.
The I'll try to keep it relatively succinct because I tend to be a blabbermouth on this sort of
Oh,
topic,
dude,
and I
I
haven't
encourage
gotten
it,
better at.
by the way. I encourage a good ramble. I think it's absolutely awesome. So no worries.
We do a little
100%.
rambling. um, so I trying to see where I could take this back to. I've sort of always been in the creative world. I think as a kid, always was making anything I could. I feel like I my roots are in film. So like growing up, I was always making like short films and stuff with the neighborhood kids on like uh, old mini DV cameras and stuff. Doing that and like stop motion stuff, like that was my jam as a kid, and naturally kind of
Nice.
progressed to like uh more like narrative short films through high school, and then went to film school, um and pursued that. And since since getting out of college, I for work, I started working at a coffee shop, and from there I just started like um taking over their social media just because I had a camera, and so I was just started taking photos. But it was a DSLR, so I had it for video, but I was like, I've got this camera, I can also shoot photos. I can take photos for you guys. But I never can. I remember like anytime someone called me a photographer at that point, I was like, oh no, I'm not a photographer. This is a video camera. I can just take photos on it. So kind of got thrown into it, and that from there I started my first business as like a marketing company that does video and photo, some graphic design, and a little bit of web design stuff. So that's I've been doing that as my full-time gig for the last like 7 years now. And um so getting into photography was sort of this accident, I think, or not an accident, but just it wasn't a plan of mine, and it just sort of was a byproduct of jumping into video and getting more comfortable with a DSLR. It made the jump to photography pretty simple. And what I really liked about it, it was at a time where I was starting to get really, I don't know, frustrated with film and the film industry because it's super cutthroat. And I lived in LA for a little while, and it was like some of the worst years of my life. I think it was just the type of people that you're around in that world are just absolutely awful for the most part, at least in my experience. So I hated that. I also hated how long it took to make a film. It really does take a lot of time and a lot of people. And I think naturally, as I've come to realize, I like working by myself. And photography allows for an specifically composite photography that I do now allows for sort of a much faster way to kind of manifest ideas and like bring them to fruition, and you can do them by yourself. Like I do all my work by myself, and a lot of times like I'm the subject of the work too, so like I can do 90% of what I do by myself and fairly quickly. And so that was like, once I sort of realized that, that was kind of a game changer. I haven't really done too much in film since then. um, and the way that that or the way that like this um I don't know, this artistic career has like sprung up out of nowhere started in 2021, where I think a lot of people have this similar story where I got in purely for the speculative assets on like Nifty Gateway and stuff, and like absolutely over leveraged myself to oblivion buying those just insane open editions like every day. Like it was awful, but like it was a good in retrospect, it was a good crash course, I think, in the space. And I think by the end of spring of 2021, I was like tapped out of buying stuff, and I just kind of sat for a little bit and was just sort of enjoying the community aspect that was around at that time. And um, I had one of the last things I had kind of like aped into was Pac, PAK, that art, the anonymous artist.
Yes.
He had a Nifty Gateway drop with Sotheby's, and I remember saying like, "This is the last thing I'm buying. I'm done after this." And like, thank God, I really think I got lucky, because that one ended up being really it just worked out, and the community was pretty rad. From that piece, from that collection that Pac dropped. They had a burning mechanism that introduced a currency called Ash. And
Yes.
fast forward to would have been like October or November of 2021. There was sort of a movement of artists to only accept Ash as a currency, and sort of right place at the right time, because also at the same time um, was like right when photography actually became a viable, like um, a medium that people were actually paying attention to and starting to collect. And if you remember, like in spring of 2021, it was all like 3D art, absolutely no photography. Um, and so it's sort of a lot of these things kind of aligned. And I had a previous collection of work that I made a photo book out of, that I put out in this currency, Ash, and it sold out overnight. I just woke up, checked my email, I saw every piece sold, and I remember just like sitting in bed. It was like 3 a.m. or something. I was just sitting in bed, staring at the ceiling in the dark, being like, "Oh, okay." Like I think this is what, I'm not even
Fuck
kidding when
yeah.
I say that I was like, I said to myself, like, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. That was crazy. Like to be in a spot where someone, like people appreciated uh the stuff I was making, the stuff that I had made, to that level where they're willing to like spend money and like collect it and showcase it. Like that was just this form of validation that like I think I'd always been trying to find in film. It's tremendously difficult, and I was able to get that through photography in that moment, and haven't looked back since then. And yeah, it's been an absolutely wild wild ride. I think anyone who's here has been on this insane volatile journey, and but it's been awesome, and I wouldn't change a thing. So
It's fucking awesome, man. So like how big was the collection? Was it like, so you priced it in Ash, was it like a large supply thing? Like,
it was a small collection of one of ones, and I want to say there were uh, I don't think there was any more than 15 tokens. And I believe they were
nice.
like for one or two Ash at the time, which might have been like maybe something between 100 and 200 bucks each or something.
Nice. But it gave you this like belief in knowing that people are willing to buy this kind of work, the work that you're putting out, the like vibes that you're putting out. And it like affirmed that energy, basically.
It did, and it truthfully was, it really, I remember the day before that where like I was with a buddy and he was telling me I should just try it because it genuinely seemed like such a shot in the dark. Like up until that point, it had never crossed my mind that that was something that like I could do. Like I obviously people were doing that, but it just, there's a lot, especially in 2021, there was a lot of noise, right? Like every day was a whole, it was like every day was like a month, and like there's a billion things going on, and I really felt like such a small fish in that pond. But I think that almost is more of a testament to the community that I was a part of at that time. And I think for a lot of other artists, that's sort of uh, one of the gateways to getting any sort of success, is sort of finding your community of people who are like uh, super supportive, and in any way that's not necessarily monetarily, but like willing to repost or like engage with
Mhm.
stuff on the timeline. Or at that time it was mostly in Discord. So um, yeah, it was a really exciting, time. But then it was, as everyone knows, the trajectory of all of that. It was like by the end of March of 2022, like just like it was just scorched earth. There's like nothing left. So like I feel like that's when most people like left, and like it was pretty abysmal. But uh grateful for that. Like it made things harder in some ways to like get success immediately and then to like fall off a cliff. That made it really difficult, like mentally, I think, for me and others. But in it definitely, I think ultimately now I'm just more grateful for it because I have some perspective, especially in times like this, where like we obviously had a little bit of a crash this past week, and it's times like this where I'm like, it's nice to have that, to contextualize the environment that we're in right now, where I'm like, this is not that bad. Like you could probably still sell work for $100, and that's freaking awesome. Like that's still like not even a thing that would be possible without the space. So it's still,
Literally.
there's a lot to be really happy about right now.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you think about like 2021 was just absolutely insane when it comes to the amount of liquidity that was flowing around speculatively, because people were making collections, artists were basically going from like nobody knows who they are at all to literally making some six figures, some making seven figures, but like five-figure drops were like normal. People were spending 50 to $100,000 a day on literally on NFTs and selling them the same day for 100 and, like, say they spend 100 grand, they'll sell it for 110. Like just the liquidity was so intense because people didn't gamble on meme coins in the same way as they do today. And all of that liquidity kind of flushed out of the system. So now it's a little more difficult, but the people collecting are literally collecting for the art. Like people are buying your work for one ETH, for a one of one or more. And they're doing it because they love it, not because they're like, yo, I'm going to flip this for 1.1 in an hour. You know what I mean? Like people were buying Pac's cubes, Pac or Pac, for like, he made like $70 million off of like some of his drops. I mean, it's like, I was like, I saw the amount that they were trying to raise for some of these things. And I was like, I don't know. I honestly don't know if he's going to be able to do it. And then, yep, lo and behold, this MFer literally makes like $70 million off a drop. And I'm like, this is insane. And, those times though were just absolutely crazy. So like, now being able to sell something for $100 is still fucking awesome. Like, I think people are just like, yeah, the market's in a bear market, but in reality, like, is it really in a bear market? I mean, think about when you're making film. Like, I just saw a statistic today on Game of Thrones, or not Game of Thrones, but House of the Dragon. It cost $200 million to make season two. Did you watch House of the Dragon at all, or are you not really into
No,
it?
I
Or?
haven't. I watched Game of Thrones, but not House of Dragon.
Okay, so like basically, how like intense that they can get. Like last season of Game of Thrones it was like 405 or $500 million was spent on that season. This season 2 of House of the Dragon was $200 million spent. And the lead actors, they were only paid like 30 grand an episode versus this large amount of money that was being spent. But like, if you think about it, like $200 million to make something, it was 2,500 employees with like 9,000 extras. And like, now you're a guy with a camera who's able to literally make a full-time income more than that, like be super successful making art with just one person and doing it all on your own, like fully owning everything, not having to do like full sets for tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, it's incredible what this technology has afforded us, I think. So I want to ask you, like, what do you see as far as parallels from, when you first got started, you saw that path of like, okay, look, I can pick up a camera, and like, you didn't even call yourself a photographer in the beginning as you're kind of getting started. But then like, you realize people are willing to buy this work. And nowadays, like, how have you gotten to this level? Like, what was the difference between then and now? Like, now you're selling work very successfully and you're crushing it. Like, what parallels do you see between like back then, when you were just getting started and kind of just getting belief, and now? Like, what's changed?
Um, a, a lot has changed, I think, in a lot of different ways. There's one thing that's definitely been constant, and it's the thing that like it's always hard to like accurately describe how valuable it is, but the support and the community that's like I have now and like had back then, and it's obviously changed hands quite a bit and stuff, but there's always been the same level of support. And I know that is a huge that's a huge factor in being able to continue to do this, because obviously the time, like, it's a roller coaster of ups and downs. And like, when you're not able to sell things, if you still have that support, that helps you kind of continue to like keep the show going. And so that's one thing that's kind of been, I would say, pretty constant. But the difference is now, I remember back then, like, it was incredibly challenging in the beginning for me getting into this, because I didn't necessarily have a clear direction as to where it was going to go or where I wanted it to go. Because, as I said before, I'd really never framed myself as an artist, or like put on that cap at all up until that point. And there was so much going on at that time. I remember it was a genuine struggle to like think about concepts that were worthwhile and that I felt were meaningful enough to become a collection that I thought people might be interested in collecting, or speculatively at the time. And so I remember like just how challenging it was. Between, I think, starting out, I had like, before everything crashed, I was able to pull off 3 collections over the course of like, I want like 4 months. And it was, I mean, it felt like I was pulling teeth to like come up with these collections, because you're just simply trying to keep up with the pace of everything, the pace of the relevancy in the space. And at the same time, trying to like grasping at straws to try and figure out like, well, what is my artistic style? What are my what is the iconography that I'm working with? Like, how do I find that and evolve that? Like, how do I find something that can grow with me? Because you kind of vaguely knew where I wanted to end up. Like, I had a brief or a very novice understanding of traditional art and art history, and kind of knew what you know necessary, what were like kind of the right things and the wrong things to do. And so it was a lot of trial and error in the beginning. But it wasn't until that was sort of like how the entire rest of 2022 went. And then it would have been actually the end of, by the end, like fall of 2022, I switched over to ETH mainnet, as an artist, which that took a while, and it was rough at first to sort of break through that. But
And where were you before that?
well, so I guess Ash was on East Mainnet, but I was
Okay.
only doing stuff in Ash, and the community got incredibly torn apart, just by virtue of the beast. So yeah, and it was, I think in September of 2022, I minted one of the first like blue sky stuff that I did would have been in fall of 2022, and that was around the time I made that switch to ETH. And as that, I wasn't getting too much attention at all. A lot of it was the same, my followers from the previous community and stuff. So it was pretty quiet, but I was still selling stuff, and it was rad. But like things started getting really like stressful in life towards the end, towards like December-ish. Like I was struggling financially. Like I I was struggling with my direction professionally. I had a dog that his health was failing, and like it was really, and I had a car that was like barely functioning. So like I had all these things like bubbling up inside of me, and it was the first time that I had actually consciously told myself that I should try to channel the stress and the frustration into the art. And I started doing it, and that's where like the first batch of like the blue sky stuff kind of came about, and it was such a like cathartic feeling. I remember at the time, like I still wasn't making a lot of money, but the process of creating the work that was like reflecting my experience, like my PFP, which is like my like feet upside down hanging from the telephone pole, like that was based on like a diary entry that I had made at the time. It was very much a reflection of how I was feeling, and that like I keep it now because it's kind of again reminds me of where I was, and like what my reasoning was for like making the work that I make now. And I like yeah, it was just a really like a refreshing realization to me that I could like successfully channel those emotions into work, and then have someone collect it in some capacity and be excited about it, and maybe find their own uh like like meaning in the imagery or the composition and stuff. So um it
Wow.
it took me, yeah, so it took about like a year and a half essentially to find my artistic voice. And it's definitely evolved a little bit, but like I've definitely I think I'm like, I feel like I'm in my stride a little bit with like uh the topics that I touch on, obviously the compositions, the colors, and again the iconography. So like it's definitely it was a long road, but like incredibly um fruitful. Like I have learned like I feel like I've learned who I am as an artist, but more importantly I've figured out who I am as a person through the process, which was, all of these things are like unintended. Like I didn't know what I was getting into when I did all this. So like it is, it's even weird discussing it because it's like it's all still happening, and like I'm still, it's a daily thing where I'm like figuring all this stuff out. And um it's been just like the best thing I've ever done in my entire life, I would say. And it truly was not something that was like super well thought out, and it was more of a product of sort of diving in and trusting intuition, and just like allowing myself to fail and not being afraid of that, I think. So
It's fucking sick. Your work is so cool. Like, I love the vibes of the work. Like, when you really start looking at these pieces, you really start thinking, like, how the fuck did you even get these shots? Like, if you're hanging upside down, how are you getting this? Like, and this shot here, like, really, really unique. It's not high resolution, obviously, because on Twitter, but these are really gnarly shots. And I think, like, I want to ask, how important is it for an artist to find their style, and how do you even do that?
um I think it is important. I think the definition of style is pretty subjective. It's not like I'm definitely someone who thinks that there's no one way to do it for any artist, right? So like I think my work is pretty easy to like kind of dissect when you're talking about style, because I've got very set colors, I've got very set like compositions. It's fairly minimal. You could like dissect my stuff so easily. But someone like um ACK or someone like that, where their work is always like it's kind of like uh evolving, and it's like it's different subject matter and stuff. Like it's different for everybody, I think. And I think more than like finding your style, I think people get hung up on that. And I remember when I was trying to figure that out, like it probably framing it in that way probably made it take longer for me, and not just like trusting my intuition. I think it's more important to place an emphasis on um, contextualizing your work, right? So it's more about like you could put out an image, like or you can put out a work of any kind, and say it's abstract or something, and it's just someone scrolls on their timeline, they just see this singular work. It doesn't mean anything, right? Like it's like for most people it's just a scroll by. Like you don't think about things, right? So if if that's what you're trying to do, like if you're trying to create some sort of visual language, you have to constantly think about the way that you post it on a timeline as like contextualizing it in a way that benefits the work the most. So a really good example for me recently is this collection that I just put out. It was called A Beautiful Day, and it was the four images where there's like a blurred out hand in the foreground. There's a middle finger, a stick of dynamite, uh, an ice cream cone that was falling over, and what else? I think there's one more. Oh, a hand that was on fire. Um, I'd actually made the image of the middle finger that was blurred out. I had made that almost a year ago, and I remember putting that out on the timeline, and I even set up a manifold claim page, and I was going to do like an addition of 5 for 0.15 ETH, and I was going to like uh, send a framed print to anyone who purchased it, and it just fell on deaf ears. No one purchased it, and because I set it up that way through the manifold claim page, it never actually minted the token. So I was able to just shut down the claim page, and I was just like, I'll just sit on this, and I would occasionally repost it on the timeline throughout the year, and some people liked it. But I realized that work in general was a great like the biggest problem with that was that people didn't understand, couldn't really wrap their head around the concept. I genuinely got a lot of people being like, that's out of focus, right? And I'm like, okay, this is obviously not like I'm like you're really
It's like,
missing it
hey,
here.
yeah, that's so funny, man. Actually, okay, so I want to touch on that more. I want to dig on that. So,
Yeah.
like, contextualizing your work, that's basically putting a narrative to the work. So it's not just something someone scrolls by, a blurry middle finger. But how do you contextualize it? Is it through the title of the work? And like, if so, how do you come up with the appropriate titles?
Um, so in this situation, I realized that the most valuable component to it was the narrative, which generally speaking, the idea was that like whatever you focus on is your reality. So you either see the hand flipping you off, or you focus on the beautiful clouds behind the hand. And
That's so sick.
the
I love
only
that.
way to like push that further was I felt to make more images that were a little bit more in your face. And the first one I thought about was the dynamite in your face. Like that was like quite literally like a very impactful thing. So um, I just I just ran with that, and so I I like posted that as a photo set, so you can see all four of the images in one post, and it it helps to like understand the concept more. And I didn't really go too far. I don't think I ever really like, maybe I made one or two posts trying to like lead the viewer about like what the meaning of it was, but I felt like for the most part people understood it way more than they did when I just posted the middle finger. So um the the other thing is for naming, I think naming the work, I have a pretty like, naming is never difficult. I feel like for me, I always kind of like whatever the first like idea I have in my head, I kind of just do that to kind of honor the feeling of whatever the work. And I also have this other thing where if I can make work that has an emoji attached to it, that's like I'm constant, like that's my, I love that so much. And so like obviously I do a bunch with the emoticon, like the actual heads. But then a lot of my other work, there'll be some sort of an emoji that correlates with the work. And I had just found out, I don't know, like I was just thinking that I'd never tried to use an emoji as the title of a token, and I think subconsciously I didn't think you could do that, but I did a test and found that you could do that, and I was like, oh, this is the easiest thing in the world. So the titles for all of the pieces are the corresponding emojis. So the middle finger, the ice cream, the dynamite, and the fire. Like it was just super easy. And yeah, again, I think that's also like I'm always trying to boil my concepts down as to the most simplest form as I possibly can. And I think in 2024, emojis are like the most like loaded, the simplest and the most loaded from in
Interesting.
terms of meaning. So I would imagine I'm probably going to do that again. Like I'm pretty stoked on that. So I might be doing more of that in the future. But yeah, so
Very
that's
cool.
sort of a rundown of the contextualization of the work.
Very interesting. Like, so when you shared, so you basically went through this timeline of sharing the work and people were liking it, but then also they weren't understanding it. And then you actually minted it, but not actually. You just set up the claim page and then no one bought it. And in that point, like, there's two paths to really go down. You could have been like, I don't think people are vibing with this and kind of scratched it. But then you started dropping these one of ones, and you have a large collection of one of ones, and they're all in very much the same style, very cool, very diverse, but still clearly DK. Like, so how do you come up with this kind of like? I guess the best question to ask is why do one of ones versus editions and like your unique style? It's so like it's a unit. And I love that about the one of ones that you have. Like they are all very much like the same collection, which is so sick. So like I think I've just got a lot of respect for that. And I'm curious on like why you choose to do one of ones over editions. And obviously it's working really well for you. So what is your like take on all that?
Um, well, thank you again for saying all that. That's really, again, really kind of you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's just real. It's just the way it is. It's sick. So fucking dope.
Thank you. Um, it, it's, yeah, I guess, again, I think this is also something that is subjective. I would never tell someone to like, oh, hey, you're doing too many editions or you're doing too many one of ones. I think you've seen it. I think like you can, for any different situation, you can think of a successful artist, right? Like of open editions, timed editions. Like it's just, you got to find what works best or what resonates with your audience in your work. So it's like, there's a lot of variables, in my opinion, that kind of dictate what works best for some artists versus me. So I um I think subconsciously because I got started in 2021 and experienced it as a consumer, and then my first few collections were like the subsequent after my initial collection, um, the other two collections involved a combination of large edition sizes and some one of ones, like maybe like a couple, one larger edition, a more limited one, and then like a one of one that gets auctioned off. That was sort of the formula back then. And I feel like I think I subconsciously burned myself out from that idea. Like I uh, it wasn't like one of my second collection, there was a token that there were like something like 98 tokens or something like that. So I remember when that happened, like it was great monetarily, it's awesome, right? Like everyone, I think people get hung up on that a lot where they're like, I just want to sell a bazillion of these things. Like that sounds freaking fantastic. But like it might have been a product of like selling a couple one of ones and then realizing the sort of relationship and the really personal discourse you get to have with a one of one collector that is like the coolest thing in the world. Like it's awesome, and it just feels more intimate, I think. And I I I have no real plans on changing that. I've done a couple of like small additions. Like I don't think, I can't remember the last one I've done, but they're usually less than 30 nowadays. I think it's really hard. Like it's definitely, I would argue it's also more work to do an edition. One of the most recent editions I did was on Solana with the artist Rare, and that was
Yes, I was
that
just
was
looking at that
that
recently.
that was a fun experience as an addition because you sort of have, you're working with somebody else, you sort of multiply your marketing efforts immediately. And there's no doubt that I don't know if that would have sold out if it wasn't for like Rare and I like sort of um you know, having
Right.
exponential marketing impact of like two artists pushing something and getting eyeballs on it, because you do get to a point where like it's really hard to attract new attention or attract new eyeballs or new collectors. So those sort of collaborations are really great because it introduces your collectors to the other artists and that artist's collectors to you. And um,
Yeah, I love
that
that.
was pretty rad. Yeah. Um, I think I answered that. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, yeah, 100%. So, like, I noticed that recently with the piece that is the blurry flipping off the camera piece. What is the title of that piece again? It's
Just the middle finger emoji.
oh, sick. Okay,
Yeah.
yes, right. And you started that at point oh 0.01 reserve, right?
Yeah.
So, do you usually do that? Because I love that. I love the way that that piece sold for nearly an ETH or over an ETH, and you started at
Yeah.
point oh 0.01. That's
Um,
amazing. The market prices it in that sense, and I think it's the most cypherpunk way, in a sense, to go about it. Like it's the true like letting the market decide. Like
yeah, it's interesting. Like you know that you're gonna be able, when you get to a certain point, you know that like you can get someone to start the auction for point oh 0.01 no matter what. So it's like someone's gonna get the piece, but they might get it for $30. Like it's and I think
right,
again, this is where like um framing framing my own experience as an artist, like constantly thinking about trying to look at it from this, sometimes we get so like tunnel vision from market sentiment, what other artists are doing, what's the timeline saying, all the FUD or whatever. Like you get really like, you're like, if I'm not selling something for like so and so sold something for 3 ETH and I'm like, I've been busting my butt, I can't do it, like what's going on, it sucks. But like you got to pull back and say like, if someone's willing to buy a photograph that I made for $50, that's awesome. Like in any world outside of our this digital world, any photographer would be like, if someone was like, I'll buy your photograph for $50 US dollars, I'll give you cash right now. Like any photographer would be like, this is such a great day. Like, holy crap. Like I think you lose that perspective a lot in this space. So but it is, having said that, it is scary, I think, to start it at 0.01. I think a lot of people don't want to do that at a certain when they get to a certain level of success. But ultimately, like, my goal is to always sort of stoke the enthusiasm of what I'm doing. And it's also a really great way. I think at this point, that might be what I've done more often than not, actually, starting auctions at 0.01 or next to nothing, because
I love that.
it helps a lot to understand. It gives me a good read of the temperature of the space and the general level of interest for my work. And I think artists are afraid to do it because they're like, maybe in denial about what that might be, or maybe they're afraid to figure out that, like, their value, or the value of that work that they just busted their butt, is only 0.01. Like, that's pretty terrifying to reckon with. But it's I think it's actually pretty important to do that, because otherwise, if you're just like, it's so much harder to be more in tune with the space and collectors and just the general audience if you're not, like, allowing the market to decide. And I remember, like, the middle finger piece was the second piece that I auctioned. The first piece was the dynamite, which I thought was the best piece, like, hands down. And it sold for 0.13. And so I remember being like, okay, like, that's, if I can sell the other three for that, that's absolutely fantastic. That's awesome. Like, nothing to complain about. And so I told myself I would continue the cadence of, like, one of those per week at 0.01, and we'll just see what happens. And the other thing that happens with a low reserve auction is you can get like 8 people to bid on something, and the price still only ends up being like 0.025 or something, right? Because there's like,
Right,
they
right.
can bid in smaller increments. So I think at a certain point, if you get enough people bidding, then it's like you get attention for the work, and it's like, there's been 12 different people who bid on this. Like, there are 12 people who are interested enough to try to acquire this with their hard-earned money. Like, that is sort of sends out a signal, I think, to others. And I do my best to, like, publicize that as that's happening. I'll put out tweets of, like, where the auction's at, and I'll show all the bidders, so it, like, sort of gives them some, like, gives them some credit for bidding on the work. And I think everyone just gets stoked on it. And in this case, doing it this way, one by one, and spreading them out a week at a time, that also helped contextualize the work even further, because people saw the first one for like a whole week, and then that auction's going on, they see the images, then the next week they see the other one. And it sort of was best case scenario, where, like, it just got the right amount of eyeballs. And the last 3, I had never previously ever been on the foundation homepage. And the the three the last 3 pieces, every single time they went to auction, they were on the foundation homepage. So it was like, it all that to say, I think it's just this, like, this the way that I price the work, the way that I set up the auctions in that way, again, ties back to just trying to contextualize everything, and, like, allow people the opportunity to understand what this series of work is, and what I'm trying to do as an artist aesthetically. And I think, to this point, that collection is probably the best, like, example of what I've been trying to do up until this point. So that's a long-winded way to explain all that, but I think that's pretty important to like, put that out there.
Makes really good sense. I think it takes balls to do it. And I'm a huge fan of being ballsy in this space. Like, you have to. I think to really, like, make your impact, you have to be ballsy. You can't be afraid. And yeah, you know, you may spend a month working on a piece, list it for 0.01 reserve, and maybe someone ends up getting it for that. And in reality, that is the risk that you may have to take in order to get into price discovery mode with your work. Like maybe that piece isn't the one. It's like so funny because I think usually as artists, we're like, yo, this is the best one. And then the market is like, no, I think that one's the best one. And you're like, dude, that was my least favorite one out of the group. Like, and it ends up being like that. And it's weird, but I think that letting the market decide is the most dopest way to like, you know, show that there's interest in your work. And now like you see someone, you know, you hit over an ETH on that work. I'm pretty sure, unless it was like right below it, but I'm pretty sure you exceeded it over an ETH. And then the future works now, if you start again at 0.01, like it's like, yo, like I'm insta bidding this because it's like, now I'm not even going to bid 0.01. It's going to be a waste of time. I'm just going to jump to 0.1 or I'm just going to jump to 0.2. And like over time, that snowball effect is so powerful. So I think it's a better strategy than listing for 1 ETH and then just waiting forever. Because in that time, like I've always been a big proponent for editions because I want to get my work in the most hands of people as possible. And then from there, I could build upon it. And I haven't really ever done one of ones besides just random glitch artworks that take me an hour to make or 2 hours. And I'm like confident enough to throw it in as a one of one because I haven't spent a month making this work. Like some of my other pieces take like a month, 2 months to make. So like I haven't ever had the balls to drop it as a one of one, but I'm gearing towards that now. I've been working on a piece, for example, like for over a month now, and it's really detailed, but I want to do it as a 0.01 reserve or zero reserve even, and just see. Like worst case scenario, you know, maybe someone gets it for 0.01 if somebody bids on it then. But like I'm really inspired by you doing that. And that's like something that's really sick. And I hope that, you know, as time goes on, if you continue doing that, I think that it's going to be really successful. And I guess the market will always be the one to decide. But I love hearing your take on like discovering style and how it's not like a playbook. And like ultimately, what I think I learned from you is that you have put in the hours and the time and the energy and you've gone through the trenches to figure out what works, you know, what people like. And it's tough because you're so zoomed in on it to like figure out, you know what we like as artists, but then letting the market kind of like decide, it takes a lot of balls, man. So like props to you for doing that kind of thing. And you're inspiring artists out there, you know, you're inspiring people. Like people see that you had that success with your auction. It inspires me to be like, yo, like let's get out there and just say fuck it, pour the energy into a work, a showstopper work, and drop it as a 0.01. Fucking let's do it. You know what I mean? So like keep crushing it, man. I mean, like I'm excited for the future for you. I feel like you're just getting started. So what's next for DK? Like, are you going to continue building the one-on-one collection? Is there an end to completing that collection? Is like a supply number like of 100 or 50 or 69 or something? Or like what is next in for you?
Again, thank you. You just said a lot of really nice things. So thank you again. That's incredibly kind of you.
I mean it, man.
As for what's next, it's so I'm working on this year. I've been working on I put out a new contract called Blue Skies Forever, and the whole point of the contract is to tell the story of the story is supposed to bring together all of my characters and iconography into one narrative, right? So there's only been 2 pieces so far. Both have been acquired by the freaking legend Bats. Super grateful.
Crushing.
It's the next token is going to be probably the next thing I do. So the third token. There's a lot of the pieces themselves are incredibly nuanced and like sort of weird maybe. But the goal is to, like, by the end of it, someone can put together, and there's also I have no supply goal in mind for this collection either. Purely the goal is to tell this story that I've been wanting to tell. So whenever I feel I've got there naturally is when that'll stop. But I'm working on the third piece right now, and I'm not quite sure when that'll be completed. Probably sometime this month or so. But that's the next thing. But it's always important to, like, kind of what you were saying with your own artistic journey. It's important to do stuff for the right reasons, and the right reason being whatever you want to do, right? So
Fuck yeah.
it's there's no, like, I don't feel pressure to make a certain thing. I don't feel pressure to um cap anything, or like set goals like that, or look too far ahead as to what I'm doing. It's more of like, I've gotten to the point now where the work is sort of ingrained in my, like, creative cadence and the way that I put out and produce things, and I never rush stuff, which sounds like you also are a proponent of not rushing things. That's like, I think that's huge.
100%.
And it's also important to note that it's different for everybody, right? You got to figure out what your cadence of work is, what your workflow looks like, and then just stick to it. Don't listen to there's every day there's going to be people on the timeline saying you're putting out work way too fast, or you're putting out way too slow. Like, it's all of those people are just insecure about their own pace, and they need to spend time and figure out what they're doing. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's all completely subjective, and the reasons that you create the work are completely subjective, and you need to make the work for yourself. And that's where it has to stem from, right? All the other stuff, the eyeballs and the sales, those come after people realize that you are truly making work for yourself and you're having the time of your life. So looking forward, I don't have too much of a, like, I know that I'm going to be working on this contract, this collection, Blue Skies Forever. But outside of that, the only other things I'm doing are I'll be in Marfa in November, and I'm going to be taking some portraits of people, anonymous, friendly portraits as well, against a blue sky backdrop. I'm calling them Blue Sky Portraits. And it's sponsored by the awesome people at White Wall. So it's going to be a blast. So if anyone's going to be in Marfa, come hang out and let me take a photo of you.
I might be there. So.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, I mean, I was Marfa pilled by Devin Figures when he was on the pod. He was like, dude, it's gonna be cool. And I looked up Airbnbs and I could find a teepee for like $500 a night. And I'm like, well, maybe it's worth it. And it's like a 3-hour drive just to get there from the airport. And I'm like, fuck, well, the quality of people that are going to make it out there is going to be S tier. It's going to be fucking amazing. So I think I'm going to have to figure that out. I love that there's no ticket. It's just like, yo, if you made it here, like, good shit.
Enjoy.
Dude, so I wanted to ask you about something, but now it's slipping my mind. What the fuck? Oh, actually, wait, no, I can't remember. God damn it. Regardless though, this is what I was going to ask you. So, like, your process, like, how the fuck are you doing this? If you're doing it by yourself, like, are you like setting the camera and then like pressing a button on, like, remotely, or like, how are you doing, for example, your PFP? You're hanging upside down. Is that you, or is it a dummy of sorts, like a stunt dummy or something? Like, that's fucking cool, man. I mean, like, and I feel like too, even giving a peek of that into, like, a peek to the people out there listening or fans of yours, I think that would be sick, because unless it's like, a secret sauce type thing, but I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything so proprietary that I would never tell anybody. I'm pretty candid, I think, because I want more people to do composite photography, because it's absolutely incredible. And it's like, anything you can think of, you can essentially make with X amount of images. That is,
Interesting.
the PFP is probably a combination of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 photos, 5 or 6 photos in that one. And I've actually published some of the behind the scenes of that, because I have the yeah, I have all the, obviously all the raw photos. That I'll have to post this again later in the week so people can see, but this was this was one of the first like insanely composited photos that I had done up until that point. And so I wasn't really as confident, or like I didn't have the knowledge that I have today. So I am quite literally, I am like upside, my feet are actually in that position. Um, and I'm like hanging onto this gate, and like I'm hanging onto this gate. Like, think of like if you were to sit on top of a gate and put your hands on the gate, and then to just drop backwards and like hold yourself up and put your feet in the air hanging from the gate. So that's what the actual photo looks like. And uh I had the remote in my mouth, I think. Um and
Insane.
and then I took a separate photo just holding shoes up. um and I had some sort of rig where I was able to put the shoelaces in that like position. And so the shoelaces are a separate photograph, the feet are a separate photograph, the background and the sky are separate, and then the two birds are two different photos. And yeah, so that's more or less how all my every piece that I make now. The background is usually a separate photo. The subject could be anywhere from like 1 to 4 photos. Um, and then any other elements in the photo. Like I use birds a lot. And so essentially I have like two massive folders on my hard drive. One is like a bird archive, and the other is a blue sky archive, where I have like, I catalog um different skies. I've been doing it since um probably the end of 2022. um and so I just have a ton of things, and I'm constantly filling them up. So I'm in it's also important to know that I live in Arizona, and so the sky is blue like 90% of the time, and we're in monsoon season right now, so the clouds that we get with the blue skies are like absolutely insane. So I'm just like every day I have like my camera at arm's length, and I'm just constantly filling up that archive of sky and bird imagery.
Damn. You ever think of doing like any sunset type stuff, kind of like blue but not really blue?
um I have thought about, to a certain extent, yes. I have some cataloged sunsets, but it's funny. It's like, I think first and foremost, as an artist, I am like a minimalist. And so sometimes like the idea of a sunset is actually like pretty like, it turns me off as a minimalist for whatever reason. Like aesthetically, I'm like, that's a lot going on. Like I'm so used to the one color like blue sky gradient, and then just the pure white clouds, that I'm like, the sunset, I don't know. I have a bunch of stuff. I've thought about a blue sky photo at dusk, where there's like silhouetted figures in like a darker blue. But again, that's one of those things where I have the imagery, but and this happens a lot with other things as well, where I actually have imagery kind of stockpiled, and then I sit on certain elements until something sort of like resonates to the extent that I have to make it. So not, I would never say I would never do that, but at current, you know, I wouldn't, I have no plans to, but could be cool. I don't know.
I love what you said earlier about like, the most important part is that you're loving what you're doing, that you're not under pressure to do something because of some other aspect. Like
Mm.
that actually is the most important part of creating. Because if you don't absolutely love it and you're not creating for yourself, everything else is like a byproduct of that then. So it's like, do you ever feel like some of the pieces you make, you're just like, I want to own this piece. Like, I don't even want to one of one it because I want to have this piece myself.
It's funny. There's maybe a couple pieces that I feel like maybe I'll recollect for myself down the line. But there's this thing that happens with me. I don't know if any other artist can relate to this, but like going through the creative process with something, I can typically visualize something in my head pretty quickly if I want to execute it, and in that moment, it sort of is mine. Like I've collected it in my, like, it feels like I own it. And even after selling things, like any of the work that I've sold, it's a part of me and my own path as an artist, that like the sense of ownership, like the emotional ownership that I have is more than enough, I think, for me. Like to me, like I'm really grateful for the blockchain for allowing this the collection of digital assets. I think it's fantastic, but for me with my own work, I would never I don't need that. At that point, it almost feels like an external, a very like vain way of taking ownership of something, because I'm it truthfully is, the work comes from within me, and I think that at the end of the day, no matter who owns it, it's, I own it in my own head, and that's like, maybe that's another thing that I think goes back to like doing it for yourself and like getting really comfortable with um, the way that you as an artist produce work or something. It's such a personal procedure that like you can't take that away from me ever. Like it doesn't matter who owns it, essentially. So
Mhm.
interesting question, but I hadn't really thought about that until you said that.
Yeah, like I think that's an incredible answer. Like it was birthed from you. So it's like you do own that, and um I asked that because like having done so many editions,
Mm,
I retain a lot of my supply always. And I'm my own top collector in
mm,
the actual scope of it all. And the reason for that is because I love displaying my own work
mm,
in my house. So, like on my token frame or now white walls, and I can't display it if I don't own it. So,
mm-hmm.
like, that's been something too that I've kind of battled with like creating one of ones, because I'm like, fuck, like, I love this work and I poured all this time and energy into it. It's like, but that's also, though, too, it's like, I love your perspective, and that like is super massive for me. And it's definitely like a paradigm shift, because it is true. Like, if you've spent the time creating it, that is the part that you own, and there's no taking that away. Um, and the vanity of displaying it is another aspect. But like, yeah.
That's a good that's good clarification though in your situation. Like because I mostly do one of ones, like it make keeping things for myself is totally different than like if you're doing additions, and the way that you just described it, and especially with technology, like new tech, like white walls coming out, like this is something that I'm thinking about as well. Like that makes a lot of sense to me. Like if you're gonna give a singular work to multiple people, that's actually sounds fantastic, and that's like a great idea, and that's probably something I would consider next time I do an edition. In the case of one of ones, where it's like I it is, you're talking about like birthing something, it is quite literally like a child, right? And like if you feel compelled enough to create something on a one of one scale, like it at a certain point it feels selfish to keep it, because the whole goal is to have it go and affect somebody else, right? Like you want to sort of spread the emotion or
100%.
the meaning as much as possible. So like in a sense, I would argue that we probably have the same idea with you doing additions and me like always giving away a one of one, because the most important thing is to like get it in the hands of people who like it resonates with the most. So um yeah, that's interesting to think about.
I love that. I love that mentality. the most important thing is getting it in the hands of the people that it resonates with most.
Mhm.
1000%. So I want to ask you, like, what would you say as far as, advice or a little bit of guidance to an artist who's out there on their journey and they are wanting to get into one-of-ones? What would you say to that artist getting started on that journey?
Um, m- More than anything, I think it's important to trust your gut and not fear failure, and not to just not be afraid of failure, because in all honesty, it's the goal should be failure. I think, like, you're not gonna like create your own visual language without figuring out first what is not your visual language. And it's almost impossible to do that without getting your hands dirty and making shitty stuff. That should not be I think that because this space is sort of orbiting around the concept of selling and like the monetary value of certain things and like certain collectors and stuff, that the idea of failure seems very much tied to like monetary success. um, and the goal should always be, again, to do stuff for yourself. So it doesn't matter, like, it shouldn't matter who gets it, if anyone buys it at all. But like, the only way to get to that point in this scenario where you're like, finding your voice, hitting your stride as an artist, and like really enjoying it, is to find a way to get comfortable with failure, get comfortable with that process of, you know making something vulnerable and putting it out there for everyone to see, and just like letting people do whatever they want with it, um, put their own meaning on it, talk shit about it, whatever. Like, that's just part of the thing. So quicker you can get more comfortable with that process, the better. And then the only other thing I would reiterate on is the importance of contextualization of your own work, because that's been for me, that's been the most recent realization, and I feel like it has had one of the more immediate impacts in my work. And that's maybe something that doesn't necessarily come until you've figured out a rough idea of like what sort of stories you want to tell, and compositionally how you want to tell them. Like, you can then get to the point where it's easier to contextualize your work. But the goal should be like, um because I come from, like, right now I've spent most of the last couple of years in marketing. I think of things that way, where it's like you're trying to tell the story, right? Like, if you think about, like, if you're putting out a lot of art or just individual art, you should always think about, like, how can you contextualize these things so that people understand the story and are, like, essentially bought into the story. And so contextualizing the work will help you as an artist, one, kind of get to the core of what sort of stories you're trying to tell, what the messages that you're trying to convey in your art are. Like, that's sort of this other unintended consequence of trying to contextualize stuff. But more importantly, it's to sort of lead the viewer or lead the collector ultimately to understand more clearly what your goal is. And then I'm just throwing out all this stuff. So the other thing that's most important with all that stuff is, again, finding your cadence, finding your pace, and sticking to it. So, because you don't want to burn out. So figure out, like, how often you can put things out there, how often you can engage on the stupid X app. Like, figure that out so you don't burn yourself out. Set up boundaries to sort of respect your own process and you respect your own, like, sanity. And then just don't pick your head up, and just keep going with it, because it's something where if you get lost in that process, as every artist should, of just like pure creation, you're going to pick your head up one day and you're going to realize that you've come so far, and it's only by virtue of the fact that you've been doing it for yourself at a pace that makes sense for X amount of years. And that's what happens. So it's a long process, but at the end of it, or there's no real end to it, right? But like at a certain point, you'll look back and you'll just be incredibly fulfilled, and like you can't even imagine doing it any other way. Um, and yeah, so and it's something I think is incredible. All that's incredibly important, and I hope all artists can. Also, hope non-artists can engage in that, because I don't think it's such a sacred thing that only creative people should try that. Like, I think I'm a firm believer that if I can do it, anyone can do it. So don't be afraid, and just sort of follow those guidelines, and uh, it'll all work out.
Brilliant. Honestly, fucking awesome, man. That is like a crash course in like crushing it with one-on-ones, just with art in general. That's amazing. Thank you for that. I think that's an amazing spot to kind of wrap things up. I really appreciate you coming through. This has been incredible. And I have taken so much from this. Like, truly. I look forward to seeing you continue to crush, continuing to push those boundaries, and just continuing to do your thing, man. You're definitely a light in this space. So I love to see you crushing, and I think you're just getting started. So who knows where you're going to be a year from now, like another year of putting your head down, and then you pick your head up a year from now, you're like, holy fuck, like, so like keep going hard. And I'm always a big believer that in markets, when markets start to slump, is actually the best opportunity for artists, because there's less noise where people are like trying to figure out where to allocate their capital to get their multiples, and there are more people that are still here, that are like still around, are definitely in it for the art. So I think that there's nothing but opportunity on the horizon, whether we go up or down. We're playing an amazing game, and it's dope to be able to play this game and have fun and do it for you. So amazing advice. Thank you again for coming through, DK. You're the fucking man. And cheers to what's ahead, man.
I really appreciate all the kind words again. I think we all sort of inspire each other for sure. Like, it's this sort of this loop where we're all kind of like picking each other up, and just trying to do cool shit all the time. So kudos to you for doing this program. I think this is going to be awesome. I think people are going to really love to see what you're putting out there, and the people that you're talking to. It's exciting, and it's something that I think everyone would love to see more of. So like, again, you keep crushing it. Like, we're all definitely all on this together. Like, it is crazy, but yeah. So I'm incredibly appreciative of the opportunity, and excited to see all the episodes come out. And yeah, man, just got to keep on crushing.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Dude, you're always welcome back. If you're ever doing a drop or something like that, never hesitate. Hit me up. We can talk more about it and talk about the story and the contextualization of what you're doing. I'll continue to follow along, and wishing you the best of luck in moving forward, man. So you got this. Keep crushing. And yeah, amazing advice again. Thank you for that. And thanks for coming through, bro.
Yeah, no problem, man. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day.
Thank you.
And yeah, I'm sure we'll chat soon.
Yeah, let's definitely stay in touch as we go along this journey, dude.
Heck
It's like that's part of it too, is staying in touch with the people in this game who are playing this game. And like, that's been some of the most amazing parts of this pod, actually, is like making new friends in a sense. So yeah,
I better see you. I better see you in Marfa then.
Yeah, I'll have to get one of those portraits. That'll be fun.
Yeah,
dude, for sure. All right, man. Well, much love, and thanks again for coming through, DK. It's been amazing.
No problem. We'll talk to you later, man. Thanks again.
All right, later, bro. Peace.